Hey, this is Jeff Erickson from the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. All right, off to a flying start here. Brought to you by the folks at WinBet. Today, we're going to be talking relievers, a lot of relievers with Aaron Pagliaro. Did I get it right? Is it Pagliaro or Pagliaro?
Oh, yeah, you nailed it. Pagliaro right off the bat.
Pagliaro, all right. From Reliever Recon and the Fantasy Black Book. We're going to be talking TGFBI, what happens when you don't get a closer in the first 10 rounds, and a whole lot more here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast brought to you by WinBet. I'm Jeff Erickson here with Aaron Pagliaro. Aaron, you do a lot of reliever work. In fact, I jumped on your podcast once to talk about that as well. I don't have a closer through 10 rounds of TGFBI. Wasn't the plan necessarily, but as I got through it, I kind of steered into it, and I'm kind of going without a net. I haven't done a single, every one of my draft and holds has been completely different than my TGFBI drafts, which is kind of weird.
The one thing I've learned about after covering relief pitchers for the last 3 seasons is that context matters with this position much more than any other position in fantasy baseball, for sure. And so I wouldn't be worried if I were you, if you don't have a reliever yet through 9-10 rounds of your TGFBI, only 30 rounds in the draft. Plenty of saves will be on your waiver wire. We know closers turn over, and right. The idea that you can make moves in season makes a huge difference when it comes to this position.
Right. And it's not like I'm going to punt closers. It's an overall contest. I am going to get saves. I'm going to be at a little bit of and I can't trade like I do in labor or in tout or like we do in our home league. So I'm going to have to hustle. I'm going to draft guys that are relievers that theoretically will be standing on the mound in the 9th inning. So we'll be going with that. I did notice, though, you didn't go with too many of the brand name closers in your first 10 rounds of your draft either in TGFBI.
Yeah, I played chicken, and I may have gotten a little bit burned if you take at Reliever Recon, our strategy of let's get an anchor and then build from there. I kind of, my board played out kind of weird. Hendricks and Hader chased off the board pretty quickly, and then there was kind of this lull, and it lulled me to sleep. And I thought, okay, I watched Iglesias and Presley and Clase and kind of that next tier of guys just kind of trickle off the board. And I thought, oh, great. I'm going to circle Kenley Jansen as the guy that I want later on. And the next group of closers really didn't go as quickly. Chapman and Smith and Romano and Gallegos and those types of guys, they hung around for so long. And I said, okay, I'm drafting from the 15 slot. So I really have to make a decision every time my turn comes up in this draft, whether I'm going to make the move or not, poop or get off the pot here with relief pitches and every pick at the 15 spot. So I played some chicken and I lost that game. Kenley didn't make it back to me after I passed on him in round 6, which is kind of where I targeted him. And once I lost Kenley off of my board, I didn't see much of a difference from the next group, but we can talk about individual bullpens heading forward. And so when Corey Knebel was there, he was just fine. It was just fine to take as my RP1, and I'll be working just as hard as you, despite drafting a closer here round 8.
Yeah. So you got Knebel in round 8. Okay. That's what I wanted to know. I've seen a pretty wide range on Knebel. I've seen him as early as where you got him. I've seen him as late as like the 160s, 170s. So it kind of, all politics are local. Honestly, in my league, closers got pushed down a little bit. Not at the top. Hader and Hendricks win the second round, like as they do. And well, every draft and hold, they do that. And I think in most overall contests, they do that too. Although maybe not as much once we get to the main. We'll see. I think once the main event rolls around for the NFBC, aces will be pushed up just a little bit more. And I think that'll be an issue. Stolen base, the high power speed guys also get pushed up a little bit too. I've noticed that in my draft. That in the first round, for instance, I got Ohtani at 113. I was debating, that's only after Acuna, Tucker, Albies, and Luis Robert all went 9 through 12. So that kind of was like, okay, well, it's either he or Mookie, or I might get shut out on those guys. Am I okay with that? And I decided I wasn't. I still got Burns in the second, which was pretty weird and happy and all good. But tough decisions were made here and there, including passing on Rizal Iglesias in the 4th. I could have gone that route. I could have gone Presley or Diaz in the 5th, and that's the one I think that was the inflection point for me. I had a chance. Like I said, closers went a little lower in my draft. I could have taken Chapman in the 6th. I have reservations about Chapman, and we can talk about the individual specifics, but in a sec. But in every little step, I was kind of like knowing that I'm passing it up. But man, I just felt like there was all this other value to take, and I just wanted to keep taking those values. I understand at some point you still have to get your saves, and you're going to give up value then too. But I just think you're giving up more value in the top 10 rounds. Typically, I go with your thing. I like getting the bullpen ace. I like getting one bullpen anchor.
Yeah, and if I was in I can look at your draft board now and say, great, I would pull the trigger on Presley right there immediately. Of course, I can say that, but
that was what I was going to go with over Diaz, by the way.
Yeah, and Presley is kind of he's my guy that I've kind of circled as my leagues where I can make moves, my waiver wire leagues, my fab leagues, any league that I can kind of obviously adjust my team throughout the season. I'm not going to go up into the 20s to get Hader and Hendricks. I'll just wait until the 50s to get a guy like Presley, who over the last 2 seasons had a K- walk of 26.4. He's basically Rizal Iglesias, just didn't get the saves last year because the Astros won too many games by too many runs.
Yeah. And I love Presley. I traded for him in XFL. That's the one where, and who knows, maybe Springer would have come back to me. So I do not like the cone of shame. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. But it is I will say this, an overall contest, different isn't necessarily bad. Having a different build is okay at times. You don't want to be different for the sake of being different, but if I'm a little off cycle of everybody else later on in the draft, and it allows me to pluck some bargains on some of these mid-tier guys with the appropriate risk added, of course, with that caveat, we can, maybe it could work out. So we'll see. I figure at 13, you got to take a few other chances along the way too.
Yeah, once you get going down the board, you can either fall victim to the ADP or the default rankings on the site, which a certain number of drafters in each league will do. Something that we preach all the time is kind of look at those default rankings and see, Corey Knebel buried on for some reason on the TGFBI default rankings. He's way down in like the 140s. He's he's being drafted the last month or so over on the DC side on the NFBC in the DCs in the 120s. So, that's kind of how Knebel became my fallback option, because I knew that, you'd have to do a little bit of work and kind of scroll down.
Right.
Scroll down to find him.
Well, he's more buried than you think. He's 166.
Okay. There
actually
you go.
In the default rankings. And not that I've noticed or been paying attention or sweating it or anything like that. But again, I had a chance. I could have taken him instead of Shane Boz, but I like Shane Boz. And that was my third pitcher. So, you gotta make your choices here and there. And if he doesn't make it back to me, then we'll see. I probably shouldn't have kind of announced that to.
We'll set you up. We'll set you up for some other options here too.
All right, good. Because I'm going to need that help. And I know that probably nobody in the league is listening anyhow, because right guys, you're not listening, right?
Definitely not.
Please not. Let's talk about the closer pool though. Let's talk about the top tiers first. We got the obvious top two, Hendricks or Hader. If you were to go for one of the two and pay that premium price, which one?
It's Hendricks for me, because of his ability to pitch multiple innings or, more than 3 outs. And when that adds up throughout the course of the season, when you're talking about a guy who's going to get you, 10 to 12 more innings pitched than Hader, just because they have the similar strikeout, similar K percentages, similar K rates. So you get the innings. We look at starting pitchers and we see the difference between 150 innings and 180 innings. Sometimes with the relief pitchers, you need to take a look at smaller bunches of innings, and whether that be 10 or 12 innings, that could really make a difference throughout the course of the season if you continue to put these guys who are pitching more innings in your lineups every week. It adds up in the end. It adds up at the end of the season. I mean, both pitchers are great. Hader hasn't thrown a game where he's had more than 4 outs in an appearance since 2019, August 31st, 2019. So it's been a while since Hader's gone longer in games. Which
is pretty wild, because he used to be a multi-inning guy, and he's gone full Eckersley on us now. It's 1 inning and 1 inning only. I'm only going to pitch in save situations if I can help it, which still I get the saves at least, but would like more innings in
and
Ks.
we know La Russa just kind of puts a guy in and falls asleep in the dugout. He does that with his starters. He does that with his relievers too. So no limits to how many pitches you can throw with Tony La Russa in the dugout.
This is true. Absolutely. All right. Next tier. Is Iglesias clear closer 3 for you?
Yes. I know that there's a lot of talk about Clase and maybe gaining a little bit in his in his K profile, that maybe there's a little bit more there. In 2021, Clase actually had the lowest K rate, 26.5% of any pitcher who had a swinging strike rate greater than 16.5. So he was the worst at having that skill set of swings and misses when it comes to K rate. So you'd think, hey, he's gonna gain on those Ks going forward. But if you looked a little bit deeper, he wasn't getting the called strikes. So he wasn't commanding his pitches. And so if you're not getting the called strikes, the swinging strikes aren't happening with 2 strikes more often than, or as often as the other folks who can command those pitches and get ahead in the counts. So I don't see as big of a jump as everyone else is predicting for Class A. And Iglesias has already proved it. I know we don't want to mention James Karinchak. I know Nate Markham's listening to the show, and he was all in. Yeah, Nate, my podcast co-host, he was all in on Karinchak last year. And Karinchak has those skills. He is the strikeout weapon. And Clase is more of the the guy who's done it now. So I think there's less stability in Clase and fewer strikeouts, and that's enough to put Iglesias clearly ahead of him for me.
I'm in the same Raz Slam league as Nate. So, but obviously it's a best ball, it's points. So you don't absolutely have to have closers. So he didn't invest in closers at the higher end too much there. So I was scrambling to check his board when you mentioned him. So I was like, okay, what does he think here? But we're also kind of deep into this one now. So is there a top 1 or 2, first or second tier closer that you do not want?
I mean, outside of Class A, because of the Ks, I think do you count? Let's see who you count. Where does that tier end for you? Does it end at Chapman or does it end at Presley Diaz?
It ends at Will Smith for me.
Actually. Oh, it ends at Will Smith. Okay, so we're going way down the board here. Then it's Chapman for me.
Yeah, it's definitely Chapman for me too.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said, and we talked about this last night on our podcast, that the shortened season now that we are going to have a shortened season, a condensed version of 162 games, some smaller version, is going to raise the stakes for a lot of teams. And the number of playoff teams is also going to have an impact here. So if we don't add playoff teams and we have a shortened season, these relief pitchers who are on the last year of their contracts, like Aroldis Chapman, could be moved if their teams struggle in a shortened, condensed season. The Yankees have already done this with Chapman, right? So we already know that they're not afraid to move him and move on. And Jonathan Loaizaga and guys like that in their bullpen are, at this point, steadier pitchers on the mound, throw more strikes. Chapman's kind of was all over the place. He had such an incredibly roller coaster of a season last year.
Right.
Just really good at the beginning, absolutely horrific for a stretch, and then kind of finished it off with a pretty good finish to the year. So if it's anyone, it's Chapman, because one of his pending free agency, and the Yankees, in a tough division where they might be out of it in a 120 game season or something. I don't want to wish that on us, but we have to start thinking about these condensed seasons and free agency and the number of playoff teams that are going to make, the number of teams that are going to make the playoffs, and factor that into relief pitching as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's the walks for me. I can't stand a pitcher, a closer especially, that walks the world. And I just see that creeping up. He still throws stupid hard, but it's less stupid hard than it used to be. So, everything's relative. Even with him, I'm uncomfortable with where he goes. Like I said, I had a chance at 6'3" to take him, which would have been late. But he went all the way to 7-12. He went one spot before me in the 7th. Everybody was uncomfortable with him, it seemed like. So I just didn't want to go that route. I'm glad I didn't get put to that test, because I don't think I would have let him go past 7-13 though, even with that. But that was tough.
Yeah, at some point you have to say he's stable in his role to at least start the season,
Right.
And there aren't many guys that you can say that about once you get past him.
That's right. After Chapman, after Will Smith actually went before Chapman in our league. No, that's not. That's a lie. No, it's true. It was true. I was right the first time. After that, there's not too many guys with jobs right there. I mean, there's Mark Malanson, who we know has the job. But there's Craig Kimbrell that usually goes in that range. Giovanni Gallegos, who we think has the job, but we don't know if he has the job. And then there's a whole lot of, then we'll start getting into like guys like Knebel and a few others. But let's talk specifically about Gallegos, because I think he's a very interesting pitcher this year. I took him in labor, but it was my second closer, not my first. Passed on him in the 8th round here. Kind of a continuing theme in TGFBI for me. He's like right on the tip of guys I'm considering, but there's someone I liked a little bit more at a different position. But I love his skills. I love that there's a new manager, so I think that probably helps him a little bit. But yet, it's not like they've announced that he's closing.
Yeah, it's not like they've announced that he's closing. It's not like the guys who were slated to be the back end of their bullpen have gone anywhere. Alex Reyes and Jordan Hicks, the guys that everyone was on, last season. And Reyes, who had, he walks the world, of course. And so he's one of those guys that you talk about that you just can't watch pitch. But I will say this, when we talk about Giovanni Gallegos over at Reliever Recon, we are sure to mention that the Cardinals will not win 20 games in a row every single month. And so when you, and when you look at his inflated save total in September, 11 saves, that you cannot expect that. And I made an effort to watch Gallegos' September over again this winter. And there were numerous times where his fastball was not getting swings and misses on right-handers. I think his four-seam fastball was something like a whiff rate of like 8%, somewhere down there.
Wow.
And that's troubling when you're just a 2-pitch guy. When you're a fastball and you're a slider and you can't get anything going with the fastball, that's trouble. And he got himself into some jams. There were times when Alex Reyes was up in the pen. Greg's closer charts over at Reliever Recon are notorious for noticing these things that just go unnoticed if you just look checking box scores or reading, recaps of games. Greg's always on top of these things.
Yeah.
He's worth the subscription to our Patreon, of course. But you go back and you watch, and I know they have a new manager in town, but I don't think that they could still bring someone in. They're still linked to Ryan Tepera. There's a lot going on in St. Louis, and when your GM comes out and says that you're going to be in the mix for the role, that's not exactly the most confidence inspiring.
That's not the vote of confidence that you're looking for there. You want that firm declaration. Oh yeah, he's absolutely our guy in the 9th. That's what you want. That's happening fewer and farther between with all teams now these days, it seems like. But it's pretty tricky there. We're going to continue going through the closer pool and what happens when you get shut out of the top layers here. But before we do that, quick note from our sponsors at WynnBET. WynnBET is now the exclusive sponsor for RotoWire's Fantasy Podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more are at your fingertips. Want a break from sports betting? Head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down in blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at Baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 9 states: Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Louisiana, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Tennessee, and Virginia, while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. Register for WynnBET today. Make a qualifying deposit and wager to receive $200 in free bets. Promotion may vary by state. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's Fantasy Podcast. I'm Jeff Erickson here with Aaron Pagliaro. You can catch him on Reliever Recon. You can catch him on the Black Book, and on Mesmerized as well. It's lots of places. Also, Fantasy Pros. He does a lot of good work. So how do you manage your time? How do you just juggle all these? And plus, I imagine you have a real job too, right?
Yeah, I'm an ER nurse. So interesting, right? It actually works out pretty well. Working 12-hour shifts. It's nice to have a Thursday off in March, right? Like nobody else has. Right. Nobody else has. And the kids are in daycare. I've got two little boys, 3 and 1 years old. So they're in daycare. My wife's at work, and there's plenty of peaceful time, kind of just here in the spare room, grinding out relief pitching profiles and things like that.
Well, there you go. That's cool. I mean, yeah, that's a different career. It's like one where you have to just be on, I imagine, for that whole 12-hour shift, and then decompress for a day, and then have some time to write.
Yeah, that's pretty much been the plan for the last 3 years. So.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. You're just starting off on the journey with kids. Just wait till they start doing things. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be great.
They say you blink and your kids are grown up. I've been blinking nonstop for 3 years. My kids are still so little.
Yeah, well, trust me, I'm staring at that empty nest train now. My girls are 17 and 15, so I'm on the opposite side of that.
You made it. You made it.
So far, yeah, so far so good. They're great kids. Let's talk more closers. This is a bullpen cast, so what happens when you get shut out of these top tier closers? We've mentioned Corey Knebel, so we won't enable Knebel anymore. Let's talk about some of the other guys that you're looking at here. Mark Malanson versus Craig Kimbrell. Who are you taking a chance on first?
Yeah, that one hits me really hard in the gut because I never want to recommend Mark Malanson as your closer, and I think again context matters in all of these situations. So if you're drafting in your home league, I think that you have a much better chance of taking the shot that Craig Kimbrell gets moved and the upside on Kimbrell, and because if he doesn't and he's hanging out still in the White Sox 8th inning and not pitching well, there's going to be an Ian Kennedy or one of those types of guys that you can slide into your roster and replace him with. So if you're playing in one of those types of leagues, now if you're playing in a more competitive league, a big high stakes league or something like that, man, I hate to say it, but I think having Mark Melanson safety in his job, if he's your second reliever with 15 to 18 saves, you could do much. I mean, you could do much worse. You could look down this list and look at a bunch of guys who are going to be like either total booms or total busts, similar to Craig Kimbrell, like the Matt Barneses of the world, or the Joe Barlows, the Dylan Floros, like these types of guys who,
it gets gross really fast.
It gets really gross really fast, and sometimes when the four walks in the room first, and then the 2 walks in behind them, the 4 turns into an 8. And I think Mark Melanson just kind of does that when you look at what's behind him. Absolutely,
and that's always an issue there. Next, either or, I'm going to throw at you here, and you can even also say neither. I'll grant you that too, especially for the price. Camilo Duvall for the Giants or Scott Barlow for the Royals. 171 and 176 respectively in ADP since February 1st.
Okay, so I get to choose between the Kansas City Shuffle and the guy with a very small track record even in baseball. I mean, he's only faced like 108 hitters. His first 50 hitter, Camilo Duvall, we're talking about his first 50 hitters. He was abysmal. He got rocked around the park. He didn't throw any strikes. They optioned him down. Yep. Went down to the minors, came back, started to rely on his slider a little more, had great success the last bit of the season, but we're still only talking about 58 batters in that stretch. So, hitters didn't have time to adjust to that slider yet. We know that he doesn't throw enough strikes, and there's no secret if anyone's ever listened to the Reliever Recon podcast, that I am going to have Jake McGee on every single one of my fantasy baseball teams. And so I don't think that puts me out on Duvall. But I think that I can find a way to get Duvall if he were to fall. I can find a way to take that upside shot, but and pair him with McGee and just wrap that situation up. But that being said, I'm not taking Duvall if he's there next to Barlow, and I've missed it all. I know that Kansas City has a ton of upside arms, Brents and Stallmont, and Matheny basically says every single series my closer is going to be different based on matchup. So it's a series to series thing. But I do think Scott Barlow has all the skills that you're looking for because we saw it last season when no one was healthy in the Kansas City bullpen down the stretch, and Scott Barlow was the last man standing. He excelled in that role. And so I don't know that, the health of everyone's arms is always up in the air. And so if you're asking me between Duvall and Barlow straight up in that situation, I'm going to take Barlow because I know that he's assured for probably 12. He's in the teens. I would say he's in the teens and saves for sure.
Yeah, and I like how he was used down the stretch too. I mean, it went from less of a committee to more Barlow as the guy, like the last 6 weeks of the season. Now, we can get bogged down in September stats like anybody else, but he did have the job. In fact, if your name was Barlow, you had the job in September. So that was pretty good, but we'll see. We'll get to the other one in a second here. Blake Trynan in that grouping too. Let's throw him here. He's pretty much in that same area as far as ADP goes. I mean, it's all about Kenley Jansen, right? I mean, if Kenley re-signs with the Dodgers, Trynan goes back to, pick 400 almost. But if Kenley's gone, Trynan's a top 10 closer.
Yeah, I think he's a top 10. We think he's a top 10 closer. I think that he excelled so well in a high leverage kind of that stopper high leverage role for Dave Roberts last year. Anytime, it didn't matter. Man on base, need to strand a runner, get the swing and miss. Trynan did it all for Dave Roberts. So, that probably gives him a leg up on the rest of the competition. But if Kenley were to sign with someone else like a Texas or I don't know, Miami or one of those types of places where the closer situation, don't rule out the Dodgers to go out and spend some money on a guy who has closing experience and try them out in front of Trynan anyway. So for me, I'm avoiding Trynan at his cost because I think there's just too many moving parts and too much on the line for Los Angeles to not bring, they watched all these other guys walk away, the Seagers, the Scherzers, they have the money to spend. And so,
right.
If Kenley's all about the money, he'll take a 2-year short deal with a high AAV versus that 3 or 4 year deal that he would get in Texas.
Yeah. The complicating factor here, though, is the CBA. I mean, from what we've seen with the competitive balance tax proposals, I mean, it's 60% right away, 75%, 100% plus perhaps draft pick penalties. Although I heard at one point they agreed to strike those, but you never know now that everything's off the table again. They may not have as much money to spend as we think, but we'll see about that.
As a Mets fan, I never thought that I would be concerned about where the luxury tax was because we always knew that the Wilpons would stay under it, right?
Right.
Yeah, we never considered going over the tax. So now we're, we've already flown by the tax, the number that's set for like 2030.
Yeah, exactly. But as you should, as a New York franchise,
That's
when
right.
your owner is a several times over billionaire. Absolutely, you should do that. It's the other penalties that kind of suck, the draft pick penalties, things of that nature, where I think that's actually more limiting sometimes than the financial cost, depending on which team it is. Obviously, the Pirates, Bob Nuttig is probably, I have to spend over, I spend more than $1 more than I have to there. He goes crazy. But anyways, I think that's going to be, I tend to agree with you on Trynan. Plus, they have other good arms in that pen, like Gratterall. I mean, he's quietly sneaky, really good, I think.
We had Joel Pinheiro, ex-Major League pitcher, on our podcast earlier in this offseason. And Joel said, if there's anyone who, is of Puerto Rican descent or Latin descent that could really make a leap at the relief pitcher position this year, he highlighted Gratterall as that guy. So,
okay, cool.
So
yeah,
you're in good company, certainly, Brusdar Gratterall.
He's been a dart throw for me in my DCs. I get him often fairly late, like in the 40s. I like the stuff. Now, I may never get to use him, or he could become like Chad Green, or he could become one of those guys. And when you have bad starts or you have injuries, that's, God forbid we actually have injuries. That never happens. Teams don't use the DL liberally or anything anymore. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a case there where he can be useful too. So
I'm glad you brought up. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Chad Green because that takes me to a different point. And we're at this point in the draft now where we're talking about guys who are super questionable, and Alex Fast of Pitcher List we've talked to Alex about relief pitching a bunch of times, and he writes every year that we're drafting relief pitching wrong. We're drafting relief pitching, looking at last year's save totals, looking at the guy who finished the job in September, when we know every year that this position is in turmoil from day one most of the time. But even so, once 60 games go by, closers are flopping at like a 30% rate, and so a newer I don't even want to call it a newer strategy because this has been a strategy that all of the experts have talked about for years about trying to get these not even middle relief, but these guys who go extended innings out of the bullpen and can vulture wins. And now these guys are getting saves too. So they're not just guys who can vulture some wins for you, but a Chad Green with 7 saves and 10 wins or something last year, right? Is that I think that's one of his stat line. Paul Seawall
and 100 strikeouts
and
too.
100 strikeouts. A Paul Seawald in a kind of a muddy mess in Seattle. They play a lot of close games. He could get 8 wins. He could get 13 saves and 8 wins and 95 strikeouts. Man, I want that guy in my lineup every week.
Devin Williams is another one. Yeah. I mean,
exactly.
In the 2020 season, I was targeting those guys just because, had less time to ramp up. You figure pitchers aren't going to go as deep. You might have some double headers. So it was the Seth Lugo strategy for me. That was the guy I was targeting in almost all my drafts. And it worked out. He got like a win on opening day. And I was like, yeah, look at this guy here. But he was just okay after that. But the strategy actually, I think, had some merit to it there. Joe Sheehan does that in labor. He won't pay sticker price for closers. He goes for guys with good skills, period. And, I think that's served him well in some leagues before. The problem is when you're playing in an overall like this, you got to get the saves. And the other problem is, talk about Chad Green and all those things he accomplished. You had to have him active every week, pretty much. You can't time the market with those guys. You have to just what may come. But if you do have him active, yeah, there's a lot of loot.
Yeah, we have Bullpen Guru at Bullpen Guru on Twitter. He's one of our guys over at Reliever Recon, and he is renowned for first reliever out of the pen, the froops, and then also the strategy. I'm pretty sure Jeff Zimmerman does this. He looks for the guys who didn't pitch on the weekend, and then he snags them up with his fab, and he puts them in his lineup because he knows they're the Colin McHughes, these types of guys who he can plug into his lineup rather than streaming the 4th or 5th starter for the Nationals who's going to get 2 starts and blow up all your ratios. You've got a better chance of stealing a win from Colin McHugh that week. And that, even if he has a bad outing, it's only going to be 1 inning pitch bad outing. And it's got very little chance of really disrupting your ratios throughout the year. So this strategy is something that I know that Bullpen Guru over with us on Reliever Recon is really honed in on. He has a streaming relief pitcher every day. It's an excellent resource. So,
if a closer's pitched 2 days in a
Reliever
row,
Recon or anything, but I think we've got some good stuff there.
Well, that's why you're on. You get to talk about your work. I want you to talk about your work. It's good. And hey, people pay for good content, and we don't have the stranglehold on all the good content. Lots of people are doing good work in our space. So shill all you want. It's all good. I like the streaming idea. I really do. Especially you start, no team uses a closer. Almost no team uses a closer 3 days in a row. Knowing who the next in line is, knowing if that's the next in line is pitched 2 or 3 days in a row is also important. You got to really know, some teams that, that only go 2 deep, others are like 5 or 6 deep, and you have to be aware of who those guys are. The Rays can pull guys out of their hat left and right. So can the Mariners right now, especially if Giles is healthy. We'll see about that. Let's talk about those 2 teams in particular, because they're going to win games. They have really good relievers, but if you're trying to count on that one guy, it could be endlessly frustrating. Are you getting any of those, like Kittredge or Giles or Seawald or Steckenrider even, at cost?
Yeah, I've circled Paul Seawald as the guy that I have. I think his swing and miss skills are elite level, and if he should fall into a situation where Seattle trusts him, we know these other guys, right? We've seen Steckenrider kind of middle around the league for a little while, and then kind of pop up as the closer down the stretch here for Seattle. We've watched Giles. Yeah, we've watched Giles before. He was a pretty good closer, but he's had his injury concerns. So I think if there's one person that stands out from those 2 bullpens combined, for me it's Seawall, just because of the swing and miss stuff and that upside. Because they trust him, they trusted him last year. Again, this is that first reliever out of the pen. This in a tie game, in a tight situation, Paul Seawald is going to be on the mound for Seattle. We already know that he might not be in the 9th inning, but he is the quintessential target for when you're trying to do something different at the closer position.
You know what? Giles and Seawald are back-to-back in terms of pitchers and FPC ADP since February 1st. 124, 125 among pitchers. Giles goes slightly ahead. The thing about Giles is we don't know how healthy he's going to be. We don't know when he's going to pitch. However, if he's fully healthy, in like at full capacity, I think B, he's going to get closing opportunities because I don't think he can handle other roles necessarily. I don't think he's got the rubber arm to pitch the 7th inning one day, the 9th inning the next, or pitch 2 innings at a time, whereas Seawall has that flexibility. Steckenrider, to a lesser extent, also has that flexibility. Plus, they got Diego Castillo, too, who's a good pitcher, too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when you have 4 guys and only one of them has really that clean inning kind of mentality, that Giles mentality, that should weigh into your decision at least a little bit. For me, it's the injury concern over anything. But I may get burned here with Seawall pitching a bunch of meaningless innings, because Seattle's doesn't have as good of a run as they did last season or something like that. That really could turn around and bite me. But if it does, it's at pick 280 or wherever he's at on the board.
Plus, he seems like a good guy. I remember him responding to Mikey Aieto, some positive things when he saw the Seawald Stan account title and all that. And so that was really cool. So it seems like someone I want to root for there. Okay, so other guys we're missing out on. I'm gonna, instead of doing either or, I'm gonna throw it to you. I want you to just do.
I was gonna flip it on you. Darn it! Because you're the one. You're right. Because you're looking now at how are you going to address saves in TGFBI?
Yes,
so
I am.
So I'm gonna flip it on you. Where do you stand on your Cincinnati Reds bullpen? Is Lucas Sims going to be the alpha guy, and is he going to get enough opportunities to prove that he is their closer?
Alpha? I am not alpha. No. I like Lucas Sims. I think he's got good skills. When he came back, when he was fully healthy, he looked like an alpha guy. He wasn't being used in that role a whole lot, and that's part of the big problem is usage. David Bell, I don't think he necessarily seeks to have a committee. I just think he's got a hair trigger. I think he sees one thing go wrong mid-inning, yank, you're out. And I think to the detriment of the Reds and to these pitchers. I think that was part of the reason why Sims got hurt. He was up and down a lot early on. He was in some stressful situations. I remember the home Arizona series, and I think it was in June. Sims came in, I think it was 3rd day in a row he was pitching, gave up, there's some defensive issues, ultimately gave up a grand slam, I think, and he went on the DL like a few days later, but he was getting taxed. TJ Antone got taxed. We won't have Antone this year. It really drives me crazy about that. I think Amir Garrett suffered under his use, the way he was being managed too. I think Sims is the most likely to get saves in that bullpen. I don't think they're done building their bullpen. I think that's the one thing they might add to when the lockout ends, because there are relievers hanging around that they will add. I think they're good at identifying talent, but I worry a little bit about usage. I won't pay sticker price for Sims probably. If I do, I'm going to back him up with Sessa and then Warren. Talking to Clay Link earlier today on Sirius XM, he's a big Sessa guy. But both Sessa and Warren are good. But I also think the guy that leads the Reds in saves might not be on the roster right now. I think it might be a little bit like last year, whereas Heath Henry and Michael Givens that led the Reds in saves last year.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, did you know that Heath Henry was the leader in saves last year?
Yeah, they tied. And Henry got released in August. That's how bad it was.
And he pitched well for the Mets when he came over.
Yeah, he pitched well for the Reds for a month and a half, and then he just got lit up. And yeah.
Speaking of a reliever who pitched well for like a good chunk of the season was Lou Trevino. Kind of came out of nowhere. I was a big Jake Diekman fan coming into the season for Oakland last year, and Trevino kind of he just surpassed him. I mean, he just beat him out for the job and ran away with it for the great majority of the summer. I know A's fans will remember the 3 weeks when he was literally the worst pitcher on the planet and cost them a chance at the postseason. And that might be stuck in their minds. We always discount Oakland every year. We talk about how bad their lineup is. They've got no one with a name in their lineup, and we discount every player on their team I don't know why this is. We just forget that Oakland somehow finds that 6th-year minor league guy, the minor league free agent that's going to bat 6th in their lineup and drive in 85 runs, and they just keep churning their roster, and they do such a good job of that. They seem like they're always in contention, and they're not going to spend money at the back end of their bullpen. They're not going to bring in, any of the guys who are out there. Not trading for Kimbrell. They're not going to go get Kenley Jansen. And there's really, if you just take a look at the Oakland bullpen, there's really not much competition for Lou Trevino's job. I know he's like the most boring, disgusting name here in this relief pitching thing, but you're talking,
we can get more disgusting.
We can get dirtier. We can get more dirty. But 250 his ADP is in TGFBI and 238 in DCs over the last month. So
when we get to pick 250 in about May, I'll be all over that. But
he is a guy super late.
He's a target.
He's a super late target. Super
late. Trevino or Joe Barlow? Who do you got?
Yeah, I don't trust. I don't trust Joe Barlow. He did not get anyone to swing and miss. I think he kind of just fell into the job when they shipped Kennedy off and they needed to have someone close. He just happened to be the guy. Texas is not that team where they're going to just kind of throw away this season. So I think Texas makes a move to get a guy. I think they probably have their sights set on Kenley. I don't know that they can get Kenley there, so it might be somebody else. So a return of Ian Kennedy, a Brad Boxberger type, somebody who has some kind of ninth inning experience. I don't know that they can make a trade for Craig Kimbrell, but that kind of makes sense too. They've already shown that they want to go for it. They've got the new stadium, they want to fill it, and they're not afraid to spend some money at that position. So as good as Joe Barlow was collecting saves for those who, like Greg Jewett, who snagged him up for pennies on the dollar down the stretch last year in all of his leagues, doesn't have the profile of a closer for me.
Yeah. I'm a little loyal to him because he was so good in September and it helped me win labor. So it was fun. But yeah, I hear you on that. And they could re-sign Ian Kennedy himself again. It doesn't even have to be a type. It could be him. And then they could trade him to the Phillies again. It would be fun. And close that circle. But that would require Knebel to get hurt or something. I'm not rooting for that because I might be rooting for Knebel. So we'll see about that.
Okay, my turn to throw one more at you, Jeff. My turn to throw one more at you. What is going to happen with the Chicago Cubs?
Okay, good. I'm glad you didn't ask me that one because the one I was going to ask you. So that's good.
Is it Rowan Wick? I'm
going to go Jason Collette here on you and say Cody Hoyer.
Okay.
But I don't feel too strong about it. I think it's also going to be an undeclared closer situation. That's the way they kind of played it with David Ross did last year. I think it'll be multiple guys, but I think those are the two most likely to get chances. But
isn't that the worst? Isn't that the worst situation possible for fantasy? We talk about not chasing last week's saves. When you don't have a clear linear path to that save, you are often chasing last week's saves. And when you put Rowan Wick in your lineup because he had 2 saves last week, it'll be Cody Hoyer who gets the first save of the week,
right?
Without fail. And so those are the situations that you try to avoid when we talk about, you never want to cross anyone off at any cost or whatever in your drafts. But you can highlight situations where you say, even if I get it right 50% of the time, it's not going to be helpful because the other 50% of the time I'm wasting away this half of the 17 saves for Rowan Wick or Cody Hoyer.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to ask you a couple more challenge situations, but first, a quick note from our friends at Thrive. Experience a new way to play daily fantasy sports on Thrive Fantasy. Thrive Fantasy is an exciting player prop fantasy contest. With Thrive Fantasy, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. No digging for Rowan Wick or Cody Hoyer here. Sign up for Thrive Fantasy today and receive a free 6-month RotoWire subscription. Here's how you can claim your free RotoWire subscription. 1, visit rotowire.com/thrive. 2, deposit a minimum of $10 and receive a 100% deposit bonus of up to $100. 3, play in your first paid contest and receive a free 6-month RotoWire subscription. It's just that simple. Also, we got a quick note from our friends in the Blue Wire Podcast Network. And that is our quick note. Thanks to the folks at Blue Wire. Thanks to the folks at Thrive. Jeff Erickson here with Aaron Pagliaro. Aaron, you can find his work at, of course, the Reliever Recon podcast and the Patreon that they have there. A lot of work. It's not just a podcast. It's a lot of content as well. Black Book. Our friend Joe Pisapia runs the Black Book, and Aaron does a lot of great work there. Mesmerized, Fantasy Pros, Betting Pros. I think we got it all there. And follow him on Twitter at Fantasy Triage. So lots of different ways to get access to Aaron's insights.
My wife loves when I'm on Twitter, like at 9:00 at night. She's falling asleep on the couch. I'm like, I got to answer this question. This guy really wants to know who's going to be the closer in Oakland.
Dude, 9 o'clock at night for me out here and out west. That's like still, it's not even
Right.
sundown yet. But okay, we got a lot of other job battles, and it's so annoying because we got a lot of lack of clarity. That's why you're seeing all these closers get pushed up, especially in draft and holds. Boston's projected to win a ton of games, but we don't know who's going to close for them. I'm putting you on the spot right now, Aaron. Who's closing?
Oh man, thought I was going to get off the show without having to go through Boston.
Yeah.
Boy,
everything always goes through Boston.
How good was Matt Barnes last year at the start? He was at the All-Star break. You were like, wow, I drafted Matt Barnes in the 100s and I got, a top 5 closer. And this is the greatest thing ever. And then something just went horribly wrong for him. He couldn't get anybody out. He got left off playoff rosters, and he just looked like he couldn't keep it together. They gave him a bunch of money, which I know isn't important in Boston. It's not important in Boston because they are one of the teams that will go over that threshold and will spend. So they've already proven that. So I don't think the money is that much of a factor when it comes to Barnes either getting the job back that he lost. The interesting name to me in this whole situation is obviously Garrett Whitlock, and I think that's an interesting name for everybody. He was so good out of the bullpen. And Boston went out, man, and they kind of muddied up their starting rotation, right? They signed a bunch of guys who are probably only 4 or 5 inning pitchers or piggyback start types of guys. Old veterans who got 80 innings or 80 pitches per start in them. And you wonder if they need Whitlock to be in their rotation more than they need Whitlock to be that 9th inning guy. And you wonder if the organization believes that let's give Matt Barnes another run at it and see if he can put a whole season together. Matt Barnes is going definitely after Whitlock. He's going in the 240s or so now. And I'm not saying run out and get your shares of Matt Barnes, but I am saying that it's such a turbulent situation in Boston right now that I can support getting the guy who had at least a good couple months as their closer last year, who's going to be returning to their team.
Since February 1st, Whitlock 244, Barnes is more around 286. So there you go, like 40 picks ahead of there. Get the discount here. And it's such an important job too. It's an important team. They're going to win a lot of games. Some might be blowouts. That might be an issue that cuts down save chances, kind of like the Houston problem last year, where Presley was great, just didn't get a ton of save chances because they weren't close. But so it goes. Aaron, for the rest, are you ready to do some lightning round? I'm going to give you
do it. Let's
30 seconds per these remaining teams. We're going to go in reverse alphabetical order because I don't want to start with Baltimore. Washington. Give me your take on the Washington Nationals.
Tanner Rainey has the best skills. Kyle Finnegan did the best job last season. Count me in on Kyle Finnegan over Tanner Rainey.
All right. Toronto, Jordan Romano, is he safe?
Yeah, he's safer than most. He's not quite in the lock him in and count him as the guy who's going to get you 30 saves, but you can count him to have a pretty long leash to start the year.
The NL version of the Red Sox is San Diego. They have like 5 guys that could theoretically close, or they could sign Kenley, or what are they going to do?
The San Diego beat reporters got this completely wrong last year. And of course, Mark Malanson went on to lead the league in saves. And this year, most of the reports have they have like Drew Pomeranz slot in there. No one's drafting Drew Pomeranz. We've gone through the Emilio Pagan stage
twice. This guy at least did.
Yeah. Who knows what Robert Suarez is coming over from Japan. I think that San Diego is the obvious trade partner for Craig Kimbrell. And if they really are going to go after it this season, then I think their closer is not on the roster currently. So I'm pretty much avoiding all San Diego relievers at cost.
Roster resource had Pierce Johnson for a while. I don't know if they still do. I like Suarez just a little bit. I'd like to see more swing and miss, but we were talking with Clay Link about this, that in Japan, maybe they encourage a little bit more pitch to contact too. So It's hard not to completely buy into that. Pittsburgh, you paying for David Bednar?
Yes. And these are kind of types of situations. The Pittsburgh situation is interesting. If you want to piggyback relief pitchers, we talked about how Chicago, you were never going to know which week is going to be Hoyer versus Wick. But I think in Pittsburgh, it's going to be very clear. I think if Stratton is the closer, he's going to be the closer. And I think if Bednar is the closer, he's going to be the closer. And there is some value in knowing that the manager is going to stick with one of these guys. And for me, get the guy with the better skills, and that's Bednar.
Yeah, and you can, like you said, you can get them both. You may not want to get them both in TGFBI because you only have 30 rounds, but Stratton's free. He's in the 500s, so you can get him pretty easily there. We talked Oakland. We talked, Minnesota Twins. There's another one there. Taylor Rogers, good skills, but third in the team in saves last year. Are you on his train, or are you going to go late, maybe with Alcala or something like that? What are you looking at for the Twins?
Alcala is a favorite of pretty much every person who breaks down relief pitching for a hobby or a living, including us at Reliever Recon. Taylor Rogers' skills are something that they pop off the page. If you ever look at underlying stats, Taylor Rogers appears in every single one of those marks that you really want to have in a relief pitcher. I can't trust Minnesota to keep him on the team for the whole year. I think his cost is where we at, somewhere around the 150s of late. That's probably just a little too high. That's in the Trynan Barlow kind of
200 actually.
Oh, 200. Okay, well 200. Now we're talking. Now we're talking.
Now you got yourself a stew. All right.
Now you have a guy who you can take a chance on. And again, this is not your first relief pitcher off the board. He cannot be the guy that he's not going to get you 25 saves. If you can lower your expectations and get 16 out of him, be happy with that.
Taylor Rogers or David Bednar?
Taylor Rogers.
All right. Very good. I like it there.
200. Yeah.
All right. Very good. Let's go on to Miami. What in the name of Brandon Kinsler are the Marlins going to be doing this year?
Closer's not on the team yet, Jeff. We've fleeced our sources, and we don't have any specific names, but Dylan Flora will not be the guy. Anthony Bender will not be the guy. The guy's not on the team yet. And whomever that is, and we're talking the same type of guys we talked about earlier: Ian Kennedy's, Brad Boxberger's, these types of guys, Alex Colomé, guys who have closer experience. I think that's something that Miami will do, and move these guys back into more of fluid roles in their bullpen, and it's just going to be a mess. So we're going to avoid Miami.
All right. So it kind of poured some cold water on my Anthony Bender shares, but that's okay. I like him. I like his skills, but yeah, Mattingly does like his veterans, and then likes to be able to flip them too at the trade deadline. Who knows with Jeter leaving? It's a really weird situation there.
Yeah, that was, boy, does Derek Jeter do anything wrong? Has he ever done anything wrong in his life? The players are
doesn't go left very well.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. The players are out there, sticking their necks out, and they've got one of their own in a high ranking executive position within a team. And Jeter says, I'm gone. It stands with the players. That's how I took it. And even as a Mets fan who's been jealous of Derek Jeter my whole life, I had to tip my cap to him.
Yeah, and he probably knew that stuff was going down. They're pulling that nonsense, and he sold his ownership share too. So I'm with you on that.
Good for him.
Good for him indeed. In Detroit, we actually have a named closer, but no one wants to believe it. Are you going to pay retail price on Gregory Soto? And if so, are you backing him up, or are you avoiding altogether the Detroit relievers?
Never watch your closers pitch, Greg.
Yes.
Right. Never watch your closers pitch. You can do much worse than Gregory Soto. Of course, swing and miss. I think didn't Clay describe him as 50 Cent with a 100-mile-an-hour fastball today on the show?
Yes, you did.
I think that was a fantastic comparison. Soto, he's got all the skills in the world. I think Detroit is a little bit of a better team than they were heading into the season as they are now. Fulmer's kind of a little bit of a worry, but again, lower your expectations, set yourself into teens for these saves, because 18 saves, I know this sounds like such a small number, but if you can get your anchor and get 25, and then get another, get 25 to 27 out of your anchor, and then 16 to 18 out of the next guy, you are going to be way, way in better shape than most of the other teams in your league.
Yeah. Just, and go look up the best worst pitch of the year in Gregory Soto too, while you're at it, for entertainment value, because it really was pretty amazing how high that pitch went. Colorado, anything?
We like Esteves a little bit. Got the roll down the stretch and did pretty well with it. Doesn't really have the fear of cores in him. Pitched okay to some contact without really having any big blowups. So there's no fear there in him. I don't know that Colorado's going to win a lot of games. They're not Arizona. They're not that bad, but they're not much better. They're not a great baseball team. And so if you are avoiding Mark Malanson because he is only going to get 20 save ops, I think Estevez can be somewhere in that range too. So like the skills, don't love the team.
So I've got a little bias against Estevez. I picked him up in the main last year. Actually was pretty good. But then on the last day of the season, one save or one win puts me into the money. Instead, he gives up the walk-off homer. So
yeah, that was rough.
Yeah, that was really rough. But this isn't about me. We'll move on. It is kind of about me. But anyways, Baltimore, the last team to talk about here.
You've been listening to the Reliever Recon podcast. Nate and I saved the worst for last every single episode, and you've certainly done that. This situation, I could not even venture a guess. I think I like Tyler Wells better. I think that his skills are just slightly ahead of the rest. But man, I mean, I throw S against the wall and see what sticks. That's what's going to happen in Baltimore.
Earlier in the pod, you said the Cardinals aren't going to win 20 games in a row again. The Orioles might lose 20 games in a row again, which means no save ops, let alone saves. So
last 7 years, they've finished in the bottom 3 of save opportunities in all of baseball consecutively in the last 7 years. That's not good.
It's the curse of Zach Britton. If Buck would have brought him in, everything would have been different. Would have played out completely differently. But I think that's where we're going to wrap it up. We usually do a breaking news segment, but I don't think we need to do that. We covered a lot of ground here today. Tell everyone again, Aaron, where they can find your work and what you got coming up next.
All right. Well, you can find me on Twitter, of course, at Fantasy Triage. Come on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/Reliever Recon. $3, best $3 you ever spend. Greg Jewett of The Athletic puts out his closer charts. He's been doing this for free forever. And that measly little $3 will get you literally everything you need to know for your home leagues. And then so much more. We get so much more content. We've got podcasts. We've got videos from Eric Samolsky. We've got, that, like I said, we've got the Froops and the streaming relievers. It's just so much relief pitching content that, it's pays for itself in a second. But yeah, and I'm also newly joined up with the Metsmerized crew. Finally get a chance to cover my favorite team. So I'm super excited about that. So
nice.
Keep an eye out for stuff going on over there.
And of course, we don't want Joe Pisapia to kill you. Right. You can also find Aaron on the Black Book as well.
Fantasy Black Book, Fantasy Baseball Black Book 2022, Paul Spohr. And, I'm going to forget someone if I don't name everybody. And so you can get that on Amazon right now.
All right. Fantastic. Want to thank our sponsor, WinBet. Of course, we want to thank you guys, listeners. Thank you for tuning in. As always, we appreciate your patronship. And we got Clay and Todd at you coming tomorrow. So please check it out. Please hit that subscribe button if you can. Push everything to your wherever you get your podcast. We do thank you very much. Thanks for listening. Have yourself a great day.